Assalamualaikum, salam sejahtera dan salam Maulidur Rasul. Anda bersama saya Nabilah Khalida dan ini AWANI. Pada jam ini kita akan berbincang tentang ekonomi jingga ataupun orange economy, satu istilah yang mungkin kedengaran agak baru pada setengah orang, tapi sebenarnya inilah sektor kreatif dan juga budaya yang menjadi enjin penting kepada dunia. Namun sektor tersebut merangkumi industri kreatif seperti filem, muzik dan animasi telah pun dimasukkan dalam dokumen akhir rancangan Malaysia ke-13 ataupun RMK-13. Kalau kita boleh ambil contoh Korea Selatan yang jelas apabila industri kandungan kreatif negara itu bernilai lebih 113 bilion dolar Amerika dan juga menyediakan lebih 600,000 pekerjaan dan mengeksport lebih 12 bilion dolar Amerika setahun. Namun persoalannya pada ketika ini, kenapa sektor ini makin diberi perhatian dan macam mana Malaysia boleh ambil peluang untuk bukan sekadar ikut trend tapi jadi peneraju. Jadi untuk kita kupas lebih lanjut, bersama saya pada ketika ini adalah pengasas WIOE ataupun Women in Orange Economy, Sharna Sabri menerusi Google Meet. Assalamualaikum, selamat pagi.
Waalaikumsalam. Hai Nabila.
Hello, okey. Kalau kita nak buka perbincangan, soalan pertama saya, sebab kalau kita selalu anggap ekonomi kreatif ataupun ekonomi jingga ni macam sektor sampingan je. Jadi mungkin kalau Puan boleh kongsikan kenapa sebenarnya ekonomi jingga ini wajar dilihat sebagai pemacu utama pembangunan negara secara keseluruhan. Silakan.
Okay, pertama sekali saya sangat gembira kerana di bawah RMK 13 kali ini kerajaan Malaysia ini telah mengakui bahawa sektor kreatif ataupun lebih glamour dengan panggilan orange economy ini mampu memberi impak positif kepada GDP negara dan juga untuk memberi impak kepada generally the economic growth in the country. Apa yang dapat digariskan adalah seperti kita dapat membangunkan infrastruktur dan juga kemudahan, dapat memberikan peluang pekerjaan, sasaran 13 juta pekerjaan kepada mereka dalam industri kreatif ini. We are looking not only in music, visual arts, film dan banyak lagi yang kita kena tahu bahawa tak semua rakyat Malaysia ini hanya berpandukan kepada ekonomi sektor yang lain seperti green economy dan sebagainya. Jadi perlu ada balance di situ. Dan yang paling penting juga adalah dengan mencipta peluang pekerjaan ini akan terciptalah juga inovasi, creativity, and we will have investment, pelaburan dalam sektor dapat memberikan banyak manfaat kepada golongan belia, wanita, golongan kurang bernasib baik dan menggalakkan penyertaan mereka dalam ekonomi yang lebih dinamik. So we are looking about a lot of growth dari segi pertumbuhan sektor ekonomi ini dan I'm so happy that ramai yang telah mengiktiraf sektor industri kreatif ini untuk menjana pendapatan yang lebih kepada negara kita.
Kalau di negara-negara maju kita dapat lihat ekonomi jingga ini orang kata dah berkembang besarlah, tapi di Malaysia sendiri mungkin lain jadinya dan kita nak juga angkat ekonomi jingga ini seiring dengan ekonomi-ekonomi lain seperti ekonomi biru, ekonomi hijau yang ada orang kata prestasinya dalam laporan. Tapi kalau kita lihat sektor kreatif, manakah yang menunjukkan pertumbuhan paling pesat di peringkat global dan apakah faktor yang mendorong perkembangan ini di Malaysia?
Okey, kalau lihat cara maklumat saya, sektor kreatif yang menunjukkan pertumbuhan yang paling pesat di peringkat global adalah seperti sektor kandungan digital. Dan faktor utama dalam perkembangan ini termasuklah kemajuan teknologi. Kita juga ada games dan sebagainya dalam bidang reality maya, we have AR, VR, AI dan bagaimana pengguna mengakses kandungan digital seperti penstreaman dan platform digital ini memberi peluang besar untuk penghasilan kandungan kreatif yang lebih interaktif dan juga menarik. Jadi perubahan pengguna sekarang ini lebih memilih kandungan atas pemberitaan yang dapat memberi kesan kepada pertumbuhan sektor ini. Jadi we are looking about growth bukan saja dari segi filem dan menerusi penstreaman dan juga platform digital ini lebih banyak lagi avenue ini dapat berkembang seperti visual arts, music, audio, visual dan banyak lagi.
Dan berdasarkan jawapan Puan tadi, kelihatan lebih kompleks ekonomi jingga. Kalau dulu mungkin sekadar muzik biasa, tapi sekarang ada semua teknologi-teknologi yang kita integrate dalam ekonomi jingga ni. Tapi dalam konteks Malaysia, kalau kita nak throwback sikit, bagaimana ekonomi jingga ini telah kita lihat berkembang sejak beberapa tahun ke belakang ni dan juga apa contoh perubahan ataupun kemajuan yang paling ketara Puan nampak dalam ekonomi jingga?
Oh, of course dari segi penglibatan kerajaan dan juga sektor swasta yang memberikan sokongan yang komprehensif kepada usahawan kreatif. Misalnya kita ada grant, menyediakan insentif fizikal, pembiayaan, dasar penyokongan pertumbuhan sektor ini. Jadi sebelum ini tidak ramai yang mahu melibatkan diri dalam industri kreatif ataupun the orange economy sebab takut tentang cabaran bagaimana, how can arts live and strive in the world of science and technology. Dan begitu juga saya rasa apabila kerajaan dan juga sektor swasta dan everybody plays an important role ini dapat memberikan akses kepada pasaran global. Jadi of course saya melihat kerjasama antara dua pihak, sama ada kerajaan, pihak swasta dalam menyediakan platform, latihan, kemudahan, penyelidikan, pembangunan R&D, jaringan pemasaran global. This is what we call as a good economic ekosistem yang kreatif sekali untuk memberikan potensi yang besar, mapan dan juga berdaya saing kepada industri kreatif kita.
Tapi bila bercakap orang kata nak mengangkat ataupun memacu ekonomi jingga ini, realitinya cabaran tetap ada. Antara isu yang ada seperti contoh ekosistem itu sendiri, pelindungan hak cipta ataupun mungkin mindset masyarakat. Jadi antara ketiga-tiga ni ataupun mungkin cabaran-cabaran lain yang Puan boleh kongsikan, yang mana sebenarnya paling membantutkan perkembangan kita untuk menjadi hub dalam peringkat serantau, dan apa cabaran utama lain yang boleh memajukan ekonomi jingga ini?
Okey. Cabaran utama sekarang adalah of course dari segi pelindungan hak harta intelek ataupun IP kita, because banyak produk kreatif ini terdedah kepada pencurian, peniruan dan dan sometimes kemajuan teknologi ini tidak seiring dengan kandungan yang tidak sah. Jadi pelanggaran hak cipta juga memberi impak lah kepada industri usahawan dalam industri ini, dan begitu juga cabaran yang asas adalah tidak mendapat sokongan. Apabila anak-anak kita nak cakap, contoh saya nak buat muzik, tapi ibu bapa lebih cenderung nak kata you kena jadi lawyer, you kena doctor, you kena jadi somebody which is not in the industry kreatif, kerana takut tentang cabaran-cabaran ini, that how can their children, like what I mentioned, strive and live in the uncertain economic growth and system yang memerlukan passion dalam diri anak-anak mereka.
Dan bukan saja dari mindset anak-anak itu, tapi mindset ibu bapa juga yang menganggap ekonomi jingga ini mungkin tak ada masa depan ataupun ada masa depan pun mungkin tak terjamin. Jadi bagaimana kita nak mengubah mindset ibu bapa itu sendiri, dan bagaimana kita perlu integrate ataupun mulakan dari peringkat awal, dari peringkat pendidikan, dari peringkat sekolah rendah dan tinggi juga, bagaimana ekonomi jingga ini penting untuk membantu perkembangan ataupun pembangunan ekonomi negara.
Saya rasa mindset like what you mentioned sangat penting. Kena start daripada awal, melentur buluh biarlah dari rebungnya. Tak kisah anak nak jadi apa, yang paling penting you balance the academic and also apa yang mereka minat. Kerana sekarang in the world of kata orang aksesnya begitu global sekali. Sesiapa juga mampu berjaya dalam apa juga bidang yang anda ceburi, sains, teknologi dan juga industri kreatif. That is why Sarawak dalam PCDS 2030 kita telah cuba untuk menjangkau jauh ke hadapan dengan kita punya plan economic strategi kita, post COVID development strategy 2030. Pada 2030 kita mensasarkan to achieve economic prosperity, social inclusivity dan juga sustainable development, dan industri kreatif sangat penting di Sarawak, di negeri kelahiran saya, dan industri kreatif I must say that it will give you the best growth in terms of economic perspective pada masa hadapan.
Jadi untuk peringkat permulaan pada tahun 2025 ini dengan RMK 13, kita ada dalam lebih kurang 5 tahun untuk capai sasaran. Jadi sektor mana yang Puan cadangkan untuk anak-anak muda kita ceburi terlebih dahulu untuk sebagai orang kata batu loncatan lah, orang kata di peringkat awal ini, apa yang boleh mereka mulakan dulu?
Okey, pertama sekali adalah untuk kerajaan untuk memposisikan mereka, memberikan peluang kepada anak-anak muda ini to introduce something yang dapat menarik perhatian Gen Z, Gen Alpha, dan memberikan that mindset to parents that it's okay for them to choose arts, it's okay for them to be valued in all the choices yang mereka minati, selagi memberikan sokongan dan ibu bapa juga memberikan sokongan, and everybody work together in this ecosystem. saya rasa banyak yang akan kita capai ya. Kalau saya dapat also explain apa yang penting sebenarnya, kerana apabila kita mempunyai sokongan pembiayaan contohnya, something simple, just a grant for them to start something small, dan memberikan juga sokongan kepada penggiat industri kreatif untuk memperkenalkan produk mereka ke luar negara. Dan juga ini, dengan keadaan ini dapat meningkatkan ekspor produk kreatif Malaysia ke pasaran antarabangsa. It needs to start early. Jack Ma pada World Economic Forum pernah berkata bahawa the future of economy is not AI, it is human, it is sports, arts, music, it is pembangunan modal insan yang penting tu sebenarnya.
Tapi macam mana kita nak pastikan, sebab untuk mencapai sasaran RMK13 ini khususnya untuk ekonomi jingga mungkin berbeza untuk setiap negeri dan juga setiap wilayah. Mungkin kalau di Selangor ataupun di wilayah Persekutuan Kuala Lumpur aksesnya lebih mudah untuk orang kata galakkan masukan ataupun pelibatan anak-anak muda. Tapi sebagai contoh di luar bandar ataupun di Sarawak dan Sabah yang mungkin yang tiada akses yang tinggilah ataupun berkenaan dengan ekonomi jingga, bagaimana kita nak pastikan keseimbangan itu berlaku?
Pada pendapat saya sekarang dengan dunia tanpa sepadan, everybody can learn, through access of technology, dan dengan sokongan yang tepat, Malaysia mampu mengambil kesempatan ini untuk introduce dan membuat pelan tindakan bagi penggiat industri kreatif dan juga memberikan pendidikan yang awal kepada kanak-kanak untuk menceburkan diri mereka dalam bidang yang berkaitan dengan kreativiti ini seperti arts, music, audio, visual dan sebagainya. Kerana tanpa music, tanpa semua ni, what is life ya? Kita memerlukan balance, kita memerlukan seni dalam kehidupan kita. Supaya pada pendapat saya dengan RMK13 ini, pengembangan ekonomi jingga ini merupakan satu sektor yang dapat mencapai matlamat pembangunan negara untuk menjadi hub utama bagi industri kreatif di rantau ASEAN dan seterusnya. Kalau kita lihat di Korea, like what you mentioned, memang industri perfilman sangat menguntungkan, memberikan pendapatan yang besar kepada negara through the music. So every ecosystem is berkait antara satu sama lain. Jadi one have to help another. Perlu ada collaboration yang hebat, perlu ada manifestasi kerjasama yang hebat antara penggiat kreatif itu sendiri, yang perlu juga mencari identiti mereka sendiri tanpa bergantung kepada orang lain juga, dan menggunakan apa juga peluang yang telah diberikan kerajaan bagi memastikan produk mereka sampai bukan sahaja dalam pasaran global, malah mampu memecahkan tradisi dari segi their kepompong yang kebiasaan. Jadi penggiat industri kreatif harus keluar daripada kepompong tu, berani untuk melangkah keluar dengan sokongan daripada penggiat kreatif yang lain dan juga kerajaan.
Baik, banyak lagi yang kita nak kupas berkenaan dengan ekonomi jingga ini, namun kita perlu berhenti rehat seketika dahulu. Kembali selepas ini.
Tok Aman dah nak makbul. Abang nak keluar dari sini kan?
Saya cari bilik sewa kan? Ni rumah saya.
Jangan sentuh adik aku! Dia pergi mana?
Ada nampak tak dua orang budak ni? Ni, saya cari dua orang budak ni.
Tak ada sini lah.
Awak mau ambil jadi anak ya, tapi awak kena masuk Islam. Ha? Uncle Mike.
Yang pertama kali saya raya tak ada adik-adik. Tuhan tak bagi apa yang kita nak. Dia bagi apa yang kita perlu. Uncle Mike buat saya percaya yang ada lagi orang baik dekat dunia ni.
Terbukti bahawa tahap kesediaan digital yang tinggi membolehkan usahawan PMKS menerima kemajuan teknologi, meningkatkan inovasi dan daya saing. Nak tahu bagaimana nak menilai tahap kesediaan digital dan mempercepatkan transformasi digital syarikat anda? Temui kami di 5 lokasi: Perak, Sabah, Kelantan, Melaka dan Selangor. Jumpa di sana.
Baik, bertemu kembali. Kita masih lagi dalam perbincangan berkenaan dengan berperkasa ekonomi jingga Malaysia menjadi hub serantau dan masih lagi dalam talian untuk berbincang mengenai ini ialah Sharna Sabri, pengasas Women in Orange Economy. Puan, kalau tadi Puan ada menyebut tentang bagaimana kita ambil contoh Korea Selatan lah, yang pada ini kita tengok K-pop dan juga K-movie dan sebagainya. Macam mana kita boleh nak ambil orang kata best practices ataupun amalan terbaik yang diamalkan oleh negara tersebut ataupun negara-negara maju lain lah. Sebab sekarang ini kita lihat K-pop itu setanding dengan Hollywood, Bollywood dan sebagainya, dipandang orang kata di peringkat tinggi. Kalau nak bandingkan dengan Malaysia, mungkin kita ada bakat-bakat yang bagus dan juga artis-artis yang bagus dan bakat orang kata industri yang orang kata membangun. Tapi bagaimana kita nak sama tinggi dengan negara-negara maju ini dan apa lagi yang boleh kita tambah baik?
Bagi saya, kita kena kembali ke identiti kita sendiri sebagai orang Malaysia. Kita harus berbangga dengan produk kita sendiri, be it in music, be it in kita punya arts, in our visual dan banyak dan atas nama seni kita kena bersatu. Dan bagi saya adalah penting juga untuk pencipta karya kreatif ini untuk belajar dan memberikan orang kata jaringan network itu antara satu sama lain bagi memastikan bahawa kita dapat juga bergerak senada dan seirama dengan negara-negara yang lain. Contohnya bukan saja Korea Selatan, we have like Hungary, such a very developed country, negara yang membangun pesat dan sebagainya, tapi masih mengekalkan identiti mereka, masih lagi di tadika tidak mengajar lagu-lagu K-pop dan sebagainya dengan menggunakan lagu-lagu tradisi, folk song mereka mampu mencapai juga this kind of thing adalah salah satunya adalah bukan saja mindset tetapi orang kata policy. Policy makers need to do something. Bagaimana ingin memacu ekonomi jingga ini? Contohnya kalau pada bulan Januari saya telah menganjurkan Women in Orange Economy Leadership Conference untuk wanita. Kerana wanita ini mereka bukan saja pencetus kepada budaya karya kreatif tetapi perlu diberikan peluang dan platform. Kerana melalui inilah kita akan dapat menyokong wanita dalam bidang seni dan hiburan ini dapat memberi dan mengubah landscape ekonomi mereka, be it institusi keluarga dan juga di peringkat yang lebih membanggakan sektor ekonomi negara.
Jadi dari Women in Orange Economy sendiri, apa bentuk sokongan ataupun dari segi latihan, bantuan aktiviti yang disediakan? Contohlah ada wanita-wanita di luar sana yang sedang menonton dan berminat untuk orang kata pacu lagi ataupun perkasakan lagi ekonomi jingga ini.
Okey, Women in Orange Economy ini kita memberikan platform kepada wanita untuk membuka satu jaringan dan network. Kadang-kadang wanita ini contoh kalau di orkestra 2 atau 3 orang je wanita yang ada dalam orkestra itu. Jadi saya ingin memberikan this platform kepada wanita, be it dalam seperti saya kata dalam apa juga industri yang mereka ceburi, untuk make sure that at least kita ada 3% of women in all industry untuk memastikan kita mencapai dan memberi peluang yang sama rata kepada wanita. Kita tidak mahu nepotism, gender bias dan sebagainya. Ini stop the growth of women untuk berkarya. Kadang-kadang wanita, kadang-kadang kita ni selepas berumah tangga ada yang take a moment to pause dan tidak bekerja dan kemudian nak kembali lagi ke ke alam pekerjaan dan sebagainya. Jadi give these women dalam industri kreatif ini, women in this orange economy untuk kembali bangkit. Dan saya percaya kita dapat mengubah landscape ini kerana of course banyak wanita yang sangat terlibat dalam industri kreatif ini. Ada yang buat bag, ada yang dalam sulaman dan sebagainya, membuat beats. Jadi this is kreatif. Inilah yang kita mahukan, memberikan peluang kepada wanita-wanita, memberikan platform kepada wanita-wanita in orange economy that you are not alone. That there is a platform for you to grow your network and we will identify these women and we will mentor them. Because all you need is you don't have to be alone at the top.
Menarik tu. Tapi kalau tadi Puan ada sebut mengenai dengan polisi, tapi dari sudut dasar dan dana pula, macam contoh kita ada Cendana, kita ada Finas, kita ada dana dengan digital, ini semua adalah organisasi yang membantu dari segi orang kata latihan dan juga orang kata bantuan tunai juga. Jadi adakah sokongan ini sebenarnya cukup kuat ataupun masih banyak lagi ruang yang perlu diperbaiki dan sejauh mana keberkesanan semua ini dalam menyokong bakat kreatif tempatan?
Of course, dana dan inisiatif pembiayaan seperti cendana, Finas, dana kandungan digital memberi sokongan yang sangat signifikan kepada bakat kreatif tempatan, dan penggiat seni dan budaya kena ambil peluang ni. Ada yang mungkin tahu tapi tak nak cuba ataupun malas nak mencuba. Take the opportunity, take the initiative yang telah diberikan oleh kerajaan ini, kerana this initiative will open the doors for you untuk memberikan you lebih banyak lagi akses untuk perkembangan produk-produk kita dalam industri kreatif ini. Jangan takut untuk membuat perubahan, jangan takut untuk memberikan apa orang kata, mencuba sesuatu yang baru. When there is a opportunity, go for it. Walaupun tidak mendapat grant, contohnya gagal, tidak mendapat grant, it's okay. Always try, and bergantung juga kepada diri sendiri. Upon yourself you must depend as well. Believe in yourself, because at the end of the day, untuk industri kreatif, usahawan itu kena kreatif untuk mencapai your own growth in terms of economic perspective. Jadi semua usahawan kreatif ini harus sebenarnya diberikan asas keusahawanan juga. Untuk memastikan mereka tidak orang kata lari jauh daripada what is their goal. Their goal is of course untuk mencapai passion mereka, tapi in the same time you also need your revenue, you also need your profit.
Dan kalau kita nak kaitkan balik dengan rancangan Malaysia ke-13, ini kita boleh kata perkara yang baru diterapkan ataupun diangkat dalam rancangan-rancangan Malaysia yang sebelum ini. Tapi bagaimana kita nak pastikan sasaran itu tercapai? Adakah kita perlu adakan ataupun mekanisme dan pendekatan baru ataupun dasar yang lebih radikal supaya kita nak pastikan semua penggiat-penggiat ekonomi jingga ini suaranya didengari dan diangkat di, orang kata, sewaktu dibahaskan di Dewan Rakyat nanti?
Bagi saya, in terms of policy maker juga, kena ada orang yang betul-betul dapat bercakap, pilihan untuk mereka yang dapat betul-betul bercakap dalam mempromosikan ataupun to represent their own industry. Bagi saya, ini penting kerana suara penggiat industri kreatif ini perlu didengar. Mereka dalam bidang muzik macam mana, mereka dalam seni persembahan, dalam audio, dalam visual, dalam film. So everybody has their own role. Everybody has their own problems. Dan ini sebenarnya yang perlu didengar. Apakah masalah-masalah yang dapat what is the solution to this problem? Dan paling penting juga dari segi kemudahan dan juga infrastruktur. Binalah kemudahan dan platform yang sesuai mengikuti peredaran zaman. Termasuklah kita buatlah lebih banyak studio seni, pusat reka bentuk, ruang digital, ruang seni persembahan untuk kandungan kreatif. Sediakan latihan dan pembangunan kemahiran dalam industri kreatif ini secara percuma. Give more opportunities kepada mereka yang berada di luar bandar, untuk mempelajari ini bersama. Give access to the children to learn as well, as to meningkatkan their interest dari awal lagi, terutama yang di bandar dan juga di luar bandar, dan juga meningkatkan ekspor produk kreatif Malaysia ini ke pasaran antarabangsa. Use this platform to promote the country dan berikan sokongan kepada penggiat industri kreatif. Dan of course menyediakan akses kepada pembiayaan lah. Berikan lebih banyak grant, berikan lebih banyak latihan, itu bagi saya, because if you give, there will be no sustainability towards the end. Keep giving. Jadi kita nak lebih sustainable. Kita bagilah education kepada penggiat industri supaya mereka ini dapat menjana pendapatan pada masa akan datang, dan through knowledge, they will be future.
Tapi Puan Syahnaz, ada juga persoalan sebab kita tahu kebanyakan dalam pekerjaan dalam ekonomi jingga ni adalah freelancer ataupun pekerja-pekerja gig. Jadi mereka mempersoalkan dari segi gaji dan juga pembayaran yang tidak setimpal dengan kerja yang mereka lakukan. Contoh sebagai kerja production yang kerja daripada pagi sampai malam, mungkin pembayaran tidak setimpal dengan apa yang mereka lakukan. Jadi mungkin apa yang Puan boleh katakan supaya mereka ini tidak, orang kata, terbantut hasrat mereka untuk mengangkat ekonomi jingga ini?
This is the problem yang dari dulu lagi perlu ditangani. Saya rasa untuk penggiat seni kreatif ini perlu juga tahu what are hak mereka sebagai pekerja. Ramai yang lebih memilih untuk menjadi freelancer sebab apa? lebih senang. Jadi dia more, orang kata dia tidak terikat kepada peraturan dan sebagainya. Jadi inilah polisi-polisi yang boleh dipikirkan oleh kerajaan bagaimana hendak membantu pekerja-pekerja dalam industri kreatif ini. Apakah mungkin dasar yang dapat meningkatkan lagi dia potential as a freelancer ataupun sebagai pekerja di syarikat-syarikat. Kerana setiap syarikat, I believe you need creative people in the company. You need creative people in the government to ensure that kita ini bergerak seiring dan juga sama tinggi dengan industri-industri yang lain.
Ya. Okay, Puan, kita berbakikan dalam lebih kurang 2 minit sebelum sesi kita berakhir. Saya nak juga sentuh tentang kalau ada kenyataan baru-baru ini, Johor ada menyatakan hasrat untuk menjadi hub industri digital dan kreatif ASEAN. Menarik sebenarnya, tapi realistikkah untuk Malaysia jadi hub serantau ini? Apa pandangan Puan dan apa peluang dan juga risiko yang kita kena fikirkan?
Malaysia mampu untuk mencapai sasaran ini, untuk menjadi hub kepada dan juga hub antarabangsa in the industri kreatif. Bagi saya adalah untuk memberikan manfaat kepada pekerjaan, peluang pekerjaan dan juga merangsang pertumbuhan dalam teknologi, pemasaran dan juga pelancongan. Kerana apabila kita dapat memperkenalkan produk dan juga budaya tempatan kita, our own identity is a Malaysian, kita dapat menyumbang kepada pendapatan negara, peningkatan ekspor kita dan juga pembangunan ekonomi. So, creative economy ni sangat luas. The orange economy term is actually very, very big. Kita kena narrow it down dan memikirkan bagaimana menerusi RMK 13 ini berikan penekanan kepada salah satu sektor utama. Dan I'm sure that Malaysia memang berpotensi untuk menjadi hub utama bagi industri kreatif di rantau ini, di ASEAN dan seterusnya, memberi peluang ekonomi baru yang lebih mampan dan juga inklusif.
Okey, baik. Jadi jelas ekonomi jingga ini bukan sekadar tentang hiburan ataupun seni je semata-mata, tapi ada kuasa besar untuk jana ekonomi, cipta pekerjaan dan bawa identiti kita ke mata dunia. Terima kasih banyak kepada Shana Sabri, pengasas WIOE ataupun Women in Orange Economy atas perkongsian dan masa yang diberikan tadi. Harapnya lepas ini lebih ramai akan nampak nilai sektor kreatif bukan sebagai sampingan tapi sebagai pemacu masa depan negara. Jadi kita akan berhenti rehat seketika dahulu. Kita kembali selepas ini bersama rakan setugas Nina Rozman.
Apakah maksud sebenar perpaduan? Jom kita tengok sendiri.
Saya inspired lah dengan apa yang jadi hari ini. Aku rasa kan, saya buat lagu lah.
Inilah kita sehati bersama.
Debaran memuncak di STL Champions Cup. Kini berentam dengan gergasi antarabangsa. Lipasan kilat, pertahanan teguh, segalanya demi gelaran juara ke-10. Aksi legasi kini mendominasi. Terus membara dengan persembahan Waris dan Mini Fly. Celcom Digi Sepak Takraw League secara langsung di Astro Arena dan Astro Go.
Malaysia is gearing up for Visit Malaysia 2026, a major tourism push expected to surge in domestic and international travellers. And in this landscape, mobility and transport play a crucial role in ensuring seamless and connectivity is inclusive. One of the key players is Redbus, which has grown significantly since entering Malaysia in 2015 and is now expanding to travel ferries, travel activities, and now focus on culinary-focused food map initiative. And today we speak with Prakash Sangam, Chief Executive Officer of Redbus, to help us understand how the platform is opening access to hidden destinations, supporting local economies and shaping the dynamic and more inclusive tourism ecosystem ahead of VM 2026. Thank you very much, Prakash, for joining us. All right, firstly, since entering Malaysia in 2015, Redbus has been expanding has been expanding rapidly. What are some of the specific factors, whether partnerships, regulatory supports, and consumer behavior, which has been the most critical to that growth?
So we entered, like you said, we entered Malaysia in 2015. And one of the key characteristics of the market in Malaysia was that there was a fair bit of digitization amongst bus operators, right? So just to explain to your viewers, Redbus is a marketplace for intercity buses. We don't own or operate our own buses. What we do is that we connect bus operators and their inventory to customers or passengers, right? Bus travelers. So we are a technology marketplace, a technology intermediary. And as a technology player, it becomes easier for us if the suppliers, which is here are the bus operators, if they're already digitized. In some of the other markets that we operate, we find that the levels of digitization are lower. So it takes a while for getting all these bus operators to come online, right? But Malaysia already had quite a good digital penetration amongst bus operators. So it was easy for us to plug in and get a lot of inventory onto our platform quite easily. And what happens as a result of that is that customers also start seeing a lot more options, right? They start seeing many more options if they have to travel, let's say from KL to Penang. They are able to see a lot more operators, their inventory, they're able to compare across schedules, they can compare prices, and they can choose their bus very conveniently and they can proceed, right? So the digitization of the market really helped. And on the consumer side, on the traveler side, again, smartphone penetration was quite good. We found that as we entered this market, that a very large part of people who travel by buses in Malaysia are the student community, right? And students are anyway a lot more digitally savvy. They are like digital natives almost, the generation that's growing up now. So they were also able to very quickly adapt and adopt online ticketing, right? So these are two factors that helped us grow and scale our business a lot. The other thing that we found in Malaysia was that we had a very, very good set of bus operators who are very keen to get technology solutions that will help their business grow. So we were able to partner with more than 200 bus operators, and by virtue of making their inventory available online on a unified platform, and by making it easy for customers to book tickets, we helped grow the market, right? So that helped bus operators get higher occupancy and therefore higher revenue and profitability. And that helped them to further invest in newer services, in newer buses, and grow the market some more. So these are some of the factors that has helped us grow our business in Malaysia.
And we understand that Malaysia is one of your strongest international markets. What unique lessons from this success could be replicated in other countries to strengthen digital adoptions and travel connectivity?
You're absolutely right that Malaysia is our single most important international market at this point, purely because, in fact, in Malaysia, we enjoy a higher share of all the ticket bookings than what we have in our home market, which is India, right? So I'm very thankful to the Malaysian public, the traveling public, and our partners in Malaysia to have embraced Redbus very wholeheartedly, right? And given us the privilege of being a market leader in this market. One of the few things that we have learned, one of the few important things that we have learned from our experience in Malaysia is around being very, very local, right? Being able to understand the local sentiments, being able to understand the local market, and incorporate that both into our product offerings and as well as our communication. So, for example, in India, for instance, a regular customer looks to travel between two cities. They would say that I want to travel from, let's say, Mumbai to Bangalore, right? But we found that in Malaysia, people wanted to travel between let's say, TBS to a Little India in Singapore, right? So they had a very locality to locality search, whereas in India, people would search city to city, right? So we had to adapt our platform to cater to what people wanted locally in that market, right? And secondly, while we know that English is well spoken and is a well accepted language in Malaysia, still there are people who are more comfortable with Malay. So we adapted our interface to be also available in Malay language. The third thing from a localization standpoint, very early on, we figured that there are some very nuances, the way Malaysians talk, for instance, and the real reason why people use an online interface for booking tickets is that they're able to reserve the seat. They're able to block the seat in advance. And we understood that a very colloquial term for that is chup, right? So people say chup. So we use that in our communication early on just to make a better connect with the local population. So localization has been one big learning for us from Malaysia, adapting our products, adapting our communication. The second big learning for us has been how the entire ecosystem in Malaysia supports the growth of the industry. And we have really learned this by being active participants. So here we interact not just with our bus operator partners, but we also interact with multiple other players. We are in conversation with APARD. We are in conversation with the terminals, their management. We are in conversation with the people who manage the IT with terminals and other IT service providers in the market. So we have seen that in order to grow the overall market, it is important to draw upon the experiences and draw upon the wisdom of the ecosystem and work along with them for promotion and growth of the market, right? That is another critical learning that we've got from Malaysia that we want to take to other markets as well. And just to put the point on localization, right? Our new initiative about the Redbus food map is also stemming from that insight, because we know that Malaysians are very, very passionate when it comes to food. That's a very strong driver for people to even travel. When they travel, people look forward to having new cuisines. There is so much of regional variety in the kind of food that is made. Every province seems to have its own kind of star dish, you could call it that. And there are some hidden gems in terms of restaurants that serve those dishes. So we wanted to bring this alive in the form of Redbus food map and put that out and inspire people to explore the rich culture and heritage of Malaysia through food, inspire people to travel, and also make this a community-led initiative where, while we have done some curation, we also think that there are a lot of other hidden restaurants that or dishes that we may not know, but local people know, right? So it's a platform, a food map, where people can log into the platform and contribute their suggestions. And even that is something that we then incorporate onto the food map. So we want to make this a living directory of all the rich food treasures that are in Malaysia and enable people an easy way of accessing them and enjoying that.
And enjoying access to one of the local foods, and sometimes it's placed or based in hidden destinations, locations, and many travelers seek to Malaysians' urban centres. How is Redbus expanding travel access to less served destination, and what opportunities do you see in the rural and secondary routes?
Right. So as internet penetration is growing, day by day, there is an opportunity to both digitize the inventory as we go down to tier 2, tier 3 towns, as well as encourage customers to use online ways of transaction, right? So what we are particularly focused on going forward in Malaysia is that we have got very good connectivity on all the top towns, right? But so if it comes to KL or Ipoh or Malekah, Penang, things are well connected. But how do we go down towards the even smaller towns which are possibly not as online penetrated? Some is in Eastern Malaysia. So we have expanded over the last 2-3 years. We have really expanded our presence in Eastern Malaysia and connected a lot of towns like KT, Kuantan, and stuff like that. And now we are going to tier 2 and tier 3 towns, including smaller towns like Jirantut, for example, or Jalawat. So these are towns that we are getting into in terms of connectivity. And apart from that, we see a big opportunity in Sabah and Sarawak, right? Because we have been again a bit, the connectivity options there has not increased as much there as it's on the mainland. So we are also now onboarding a lot of bus operators in Sabah and Sarawak and building connectivity options. And the second part is, again, going back to your question about what have we learned from Malaysia. What we learned from Malaysia is also about the value of multimodal transport, because we understood that Southeast Asia, Malaysia being one of the countries like there, even waterways, ferries are an important form of transportation. Right? So therefore, our platform is now extended to offer ferries as well, and therefore offer seamless connectivity where people have to travel. They can take the bus and then take a ferry, right? And this is something that again we are replicating in other Southeast Asian countries. So this is how we are looking to expand the footprint and going into more parts of the country which are probably so far has been less in terms of connectivity and also in terms of online penetration and improving our presence there. This is also helping us connect to international destinations. So, for example, we are able to connect Malaysia to some parts of Thailand. From Sabah, we are able to connect Malaysia to parts of Indonesia. And of course, the Singapore-Malaysia corridor has always been strong. So these are again ways in which we are kind of expanding our network of coverage.
Expanding connectivity, we know that tourism growth requires a lot of collaborations between multiple parties, multiple stakeholders. For example, how are you engaging with local bus operator, tourism boards, and even stakeholders to align with Malaysia's VM 2026 goals especially?
Yeah, with bus operators, we are constantly engaging with them. Apart from the fact that we distribute their inventory and therefore give them additional sales, we also engage with them by giving them a lot of detailed insights about their business, right? And we give them a lot of tools as well. So, for example, we have a dynamic pricing platform because the supply and demand is not uniform across the year. Right? There are times when there is less demand in the market, and there are times when there is peak demand in the market. So how do operators manage their yield in such a way that they're able to maximize their yield even on low demand seasons and also maximize their yield in high demand seasons, right? So we have a dynamic pricing product that we have given to bus operators to enable them to manage their pricing appropriately. The second thing that we do is that we have a very, very robust ratings and review platform. So we end up collecting a lot of ratings from every customer who has taken a trip with us using the Redbus booking system. So we ask them for how the journey has been, right? And we collect these insights and provide it to bus operators with a very detailed and rich insights generation to help them understand where are they doing well with respect to customer expectations and where can they do even better, where are they falling short. And this helps bus operators to improve the levels of their service and overall give a better customer experience, right? Then we of course do partnership with government to promote lesser known destinations. For example, Penang Hill Trains, we have onboarded that as an attraction because apart from bus tickets and ferry tickets, we also have things to do or activities on a platform that people can book. So even there, our focus has been to really go to activities which are not the ones which are very popularly known in cities like KL, because that is something that everyone kind of understands. It's already available, but we have gone and got a lot of activities in very, very small towns. We have got like Jangalwala in Langkawi, for instance. We have a adventure trip. We have a Hatyai in Thailand to Songkhla one-day trip that we promote. We have a ATV Kiau adventure in Sabah, for instance. So these are, there's a drawbridge in Terengganu, for instance, as an attraction that is not that popular or well known. So we have been able to onboard some of these attractions on our platform to really cater to people who are traveling by buses in tier 2, tier 3 towns, and drive, travel to even lesser known destinations.
All right, with initiatives spanning ferries, travel activities, and even the food map, we can see that RedBus shows how transport innovation can align with Malaysia's national tourism goals. Again, I'll say thank you very much to Prakash Sangham, the Chief Executive Officer of RedBus, for sharing your insight, and we look forward to seeing how RedBus continues to expand travel access and support the growth of one country. Again, I say thank you very much, and all of our discussion here will be featured in astroni.com and across all social media platforms.
Pentas yang penuh dengan kejutan.
Enjoy ini, tiada penyingkiran.
Kini mereka bersedia to burn the stage.
Budak ni ada potensi.
Memang bagus lah. Oleh kerana bagus, aku bagi makan tinggi sekarang. As a manager, tadi mencederakan persembahan artis you.
Cederakan ke? I rasa jadi enjoy je. I rasa sebab...
I will talk.
Bagi penyanyi betul-betul boleh nyanyi, this is very good concept.
Manager manakah mampu bertahan mengekalkan artis mereka? Talk to my manager. Siaran langsung di Astro Ria dan Astro Go.
Di dalam setiap berita yang dibawa, konteks amat penting. Kami sentiasa membawakan yang tergempar dan terkini. Pastikan Astro AWANI menjadi pilihan anda, tidak kira di mana sahaja anda berada.
Hello and welcome to Niaga Spotlight with me, Tamina Kauchi. Niaga Spotlight takes us through the week in economic analysis and future affairs. Now today on analysis, our spotlight falls on the 100 ringgit SARA rollout and looking at whether it could be a subsidy revolution or just a stopgap. Now, over the Merdeka weekend, the government rolled out Bantuan SARA, the 100 ringgit credited into the My Cards of 22 million Malaysians, injecting roughly 2 billion ringgit into the economy overnight. Now, in just the first 2 days, more than 1.7 million people had already spent 110 million ringgit at stores nationwide. But this surge wasn't without strain. Terminals buckled, queues grew, and the government had to boost the MyKase system's capacity by 20% just to keep up. And yet, the biggest story goes beyond glitches. For some Malaysians, 100 ringgit disappears perhaps in a cafe meal, a treat. For others, it feeds a family for a week. That relativity reminds us why design matters. Is this the start of a digital subsidy revolution that could one day potentially deliver fuel, healthcare, even microfinance? Or is it a one-off relief that exposes more flaws than fixes? This morning on Niaga Spotlight, we unpack the economics, the technology, and the human reality behind the Bantuan SARA 100 ringgit rollout. An absolute pleasure to welcome to studios now, looking at Derek Cox, Senior Research Analyst with the Jeffrey Chan Institute on Southeast Asia at Sunway University, joined together with Vishnavi Charlotte, Program Manager with Social and Economic Research Initiative, Surrey. Very good morning to the both of you. Thank you so much for making time. How are we both doing?
Great. Thank you so much for having us, Tamina. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having us on the show.
Fantastic. So, Derek, perhaps we can get started off by setting the scene and looking at the digital rails. Of course, plenty of quite justified criticism has also come out for the hiccups that were faced with the 100 ringgit rollout. But if we, let's say, move the SARA onto open e-wallets, such as we've got Do It Now QR, we've got GrabPay, how do we then balance ease of access with the risk of leakages or even potential misuse?
Thank you for that question. Whenever we speak about welfare programs like, SARA, the question that we have to grapple with is whether do we want to prioritize reaching those who deserve it, or do we want to exclude the wrong people who don't deserve the aid? It may seem a very, unimportant distinction, but historically all over the world, we see that a lot of costs and resources are spent on making sure that the wrong people do not get access to these kind of programs. So when we talk about widening access and we talk about what do we want a functional, progressive social protection system, how does that look like? It basically, we should prioritize access to the most, if possible. And when we talk about leakages, right, you mentioned leakages, you mentioned potential barriers. There's been a lot of administrative systems that have been built, to make sure, to ensure that we reach the right people and we exclude the wrong people. We've seen how in Malaysia, for instance, the petrol subsidy scheme in 2019 cost about 25 million. So when we speak about leakages, we always assume it's related to the program itself, right? What kinds of potential abuse can arise? But we don't talk about how when the administrative system that has been built to exclude the wrong people ends up being a leakage in itself. 25 million to set up a software system just to do that, whereas that resource could have been directed directly towards the rakyat. We also need to talk about leakages from restrictive options itself. For instance, SARA, you are only allowed to purchase from 14 categories, right?
That's right, exactly. Now, I think you've made some really salient points over there, but at the same time, looking at systems that don't cost us too much, just a point of reflection, the fact that by the end of 2024, about 2.6 million do-it-now QR merchants had already gone live everywhere around Malaysia. So that might be an example of showing us that scaling is immediately possible, and you do not necessarily need to invest that much in a closed loop system.
Exactly my point, because these systems already exist. And in Malaysia, I think the use rate for e-wallet system is about 88%, which is really, really high.
Even in rural areas, not just urban hubs,
88%.
right?
And in fact, in rural areas, for instance, where, digital access is a problem, this can perform as a way to incentivize the adoption of more digital tools and again, become a blueprint for the government to use this as a welfare redistribution modality.
Absolutely. And we also have regional neighboring examples too. Singapore has its CDC vouchers, which actually show wide access can actually work. And at the same time, it has real-time fraud detection built into the system. Very interesting indeed. Vaishnavi, I'd love to go into Suri's perspective and your work with vulnerable groups. And first of all, let's lay it out for everyone watching. 100 ringgit stretches very differently depending on the socio-economic background of individuals. For, let's say, a rural family in East Malaysia versus an urban renter in KL. Let's dig deeper.
Okay, so I think when you think about how 100 ringgit stretches between the urban and rural, right, it comes down to living cost. So living costs in Malaysia vary greatly between the urban and the rural, and according to the Department of Statistics Malaysia, in 2023, the average monthly household expenditure for the urban household averages around about 5,040 ringgit, whereas when it comes to rural households, it averages around 3,631 ringgit. So when you think about it that way, for urban families in KL, 100 ringgit can help ease part of the grocery burden for the month, but it does not meaningfully reduce the overall stress of rising food costs and rising food insecurity in the urban areas. So with nearly 80% of Malaysians now living in urban areas, food security is less about availability and it comes down more about affordability. And if you take a look at rural communities, the cost of living appears lower, mainly because many households rely on locally sourced produce to put food on the table. So this doesn't necessarily mean that 100 ringgit stretches significantly further either. So access and availability remain critical challenges in the rural communities. For families in Sabah and Sarawak, if you think about it, where poverty rates remain among one of the highest in Malaysia, rural households are often more vulnerable. So poor roads, limited connectivity, especially reliance on goods shipped from Peninsular Malaysia, mean that disruption from either weather or even fuel price hikes makes food availability unstable, and it also drives up costs.
So you're adding on those logistics costs in addition to the fact that it already costs you X amount to get there.
Yes. So if you think about it, if it already costs you X amount to get there, shipping these products from Peninsular Malaysia to Sabah Sarawak will also increase the price there. I remember on my visit to Sarawak once, I saw a loaf of bread costed close to 9 to 10 ringgit, and that genuinely shocked me. And that's when I realized that a lot of these goods, the prices are being hiked up to cover the transportation costs. So among that, the approved list of items under the SARA program includes staples like rice, oil, instant noodle, cleaning supplies, like what Derek mentioned, the 14 categories, right? So these are valuables but they only cover around 10% of an urban family's grocery bills. So leaving out essentials like meat, vegetables, and other raw ingredients that most Malaysian households depend on for food, if you think about it. So for rural households, the list is useful, but not always practical. So many already grow and source their own raw produce, making their living costs over there lower. But if you add in the aspect of these 14 categories, does it really help them in terms of this one-off 100 ringgit cash aid? So that's the kind of things we need to think about. And another important aspect is that 100 ringgit is universal for all Malaysians above 18 with a My Card, right?
That's right.
So this means whether you're a single renter in KL or even if you're a rural parent supporting children, the relief is the same, but the lived impact is different. So
Very
for
true.
wealthier
and maybe how many adults also there are in a home, which in a way also did, in a sense, contribute to the overflow of individuals who were there at payment terminals over the long weekend.
And I think if you look at it, I think when you think about a household with maybe 2 children, 2 parents, 2 children above 18, that's multiple My Cards trying to be used for maybe a single grocery bill purchase. So thinking about the logistics of that as well should have been taken into consideration before day one of the rollout of the SARA program. So another thing to consider is for wealthier households, right? The amount may feel small and symbolic, but many donate their aid to others in need, which is a great thing to see, and it shows Malaysian support for solidarity. But for lower income households, it is helpful but still insufficient to address the deeper challenges of affordability.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's very interesting because our preliminary
sebagai tokoh berwibawa yang mengasaskan Bank Rashid Hussein Berhad. Beliau terus menzahirkan kepimpinan yang berwawasan. Tan Sri Abdul Rashid Hussein turut menjadi insan dermawan yang meninggalkan legasi pada rumah Allah. Diumumkan bahawa anugerah tokoh Perdana Maulidin Rasul 2025 dianugerahkan kepada Yang Berbahagia Tan Sri Abdul Rashid Hussein, Pengerusi Lembaga Tabung Haji.
Alhamdulillah, saya bersyukur dan tak tersangka basically anugerah ini akan dibagi kepada saya tahun ini. Saya betul-betul bersyukur kepada Allah Ta'ala yang saya telah dipilih, dan saya harap saya juga terus berbakti atas apa expectation saya untuk kebaikan masyarakat. Saya juga nak berterima kasih kepada Dunia Maha Mulia Tuanku Yang Pertuan Agong, Yang Amat Berhormat Perdana Menteri, dan Yang Berhormat Menteri Agama atas pilihan saya.
Ampun Tuanku. Majlis diteruskan dengan menjemput Yang Berhormat Seneta Datuk Setia Dr. Haji Muhammad Naim bin Haji Mokhtar, Menteri di Jabatan Perdana Menteri Hal Ehwal Agama, untuk menghadap dan memohon limpah perkenan ke bawah Duli Yang Maha Mulia Seri Paduka Baginda Yang di-Pertuan Agong berangkat ke pentas utama bagi menyempurnakan upacara pengurniaan hadiah kepada penerima anugerah, diiringi Yang Amat Berhormat Datuk Seri Anwar bin Ibrahim, Perdana Menteri. Dengan penuh takzimnya dipersilakan. Untuk makluman, para penerima anugerah bakal menerima hadiah berupa wang tunai, sumbangan Kerajaan Malaysia, trofi dan sijil penghargaan. Dipohon menghadap penerima-penerima anugerah Maulidin Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam Peringkat Kebangsaan tahun 1447 Hijri bersamaan 2025 Masihi. Dipersilakan penerima anugerah bagi kategori Belia Harapan, Dayang Nurmaisarah binti Abang Abdul Razak. tahniah diucapkan. Seterusnya, dipersilakan penerima anugerah Maulidur Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam peringkat kebangsaan bagi kategori Saudara Baharu Cemerlang, Puan Ardini Angelin Tan. Dipersilakan penerima anugerah Maulidur Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam peringkat kebangsaan bagi kategori Wira Negara, Encik Ismail bin Abdul Ghani. Seterusnya, dipersilakan penerima anugerah Maulidur Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam peringkat kebangsaan bagi kategori pengkarya inovator kreatif, Encik Muhammad Usamah Zaid bin Yassin. Dipersilakan penerima anugerah Maulidur Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam peringkat kebangsaan bagi kategori usahawan, Encik Khairul Amin bin Kamruzaman, dikenali Khairul Amin. Seterusnya, dipersilakan penerima anugerah Maulidur Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam peringkat kebangsaan bagi kategori agamawan, kepimpinan dakwah, Syekh Haji Wazir bin Cik Awang. Dan kini tibalah kita ke kemuncak anugerah. Dipersilakan penerima anugerah perdana Maulidur Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam peringkat kebangsaan yang berbahagia Tan Sri Abdul Rashid Hussein. Tuanku, mohon berkenan ke bawah Duli Yang Maha Mulia Seri Paduka Baginda Yang di-Pertuan Agong untuk bergambar kenang-kenangan bersama penerima-penerima anugerah. Dipersilakan. Menjunjung kasih tuanku atas berkenan menyempurnakan upacara pengurniaan sebentar tadi. Mohon berkenan ke bawah Duli Yang Maha Mulia Seri Paduka Baginda tuanku untuk kembali bersemayam. Demikian tadi upacara pengurniaan Anugerah Maulid Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam peringkat kebangsaan tahun 1447 Hijri bersamaan 2025 Masihi. Dengan berakhirnya upacara pengurniaan Anugerah Maulid Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam itu tadi, maka berakhirlah sudah sambutan Maulid Rasul peringkat kebangsaan pada tahun ini. Ampun tuanku, patut menjunjung setinggi-tinggi kasih atas limpah perkenan ke bawah Duli Yang Maha Mulia Seri Paduka Baginda tuanku berdua berangkat ke majlis ini. Menjunjung kasih tuanku. Hadirin sekalian, keberangkatan ke bawah Duli Yang Maha Mulia Seri Paduka Baginda Yang di-Pertuan Agong dan ke bawah Duli Yang Maha Mulia Seri Paduka Baginda Raja Permaisuri Agong meninggalkan majlis. Hadirin dimohon berdiri.
Sekolah. Isu ini bukan perkara baru.
Buli tertakluk kepada perbuatan agresif secara fizikal.
Apa sebenarnya Jerebu punca utama yang menyumbang kepada masalah ini serta kesannya kepada kesihatan kita?
Mereka akan mengalami iritasi kepada mata. Selain itu, iritasi kepada saluran pernafasan.
US Open is more than a stage. It's a spectacle. And as summer comes to an end, it will rise like a heat wave.
Strong ball striker, but I feel like I always hit the ball really nice.
Oh, he's left it. And a perfect set of tennis.
At the Billie Jean King National Tennis Center in Queens, New York, History is about to be made once more.
Welcome back to Niaga Spotlight. Still with me, Tamina Kausri. And today we're discussing the 100 ringgit SARA rollout and whether we're looking at more of a subsidy revolution or perhaps a stopgap measure. Derek, continuing with the conversation and looking in particular at income thresholds. Now, many Malaysians, of course, they earn uneven wages. So in the case of such a rollout and also future potential rollouts, how do we actually look at families who may then risk being cut off once they move up perhaps even just a few tens of ringgits into a different income category, but then that does not really decrease their vulnerability overall?
Yeah, thanks, Amina. I think what you just described there is a textbook case in social policy. We call it the cliff effect. And literally what happens is that, when the income increases even a little, the cliff effect is such that they may even lose more in terms of the subsidies and aid that they get, simply because the income went up just a little. And this is an inevitable and direct result of targeting mechanisms. So when you deliver aid strictly based on income and poverty targeting mechanisms, this is a direct effect. So how do we move forward here, right? And how do we avoid that happening? The answer is basically moving towards progressive universalization. That was quite a mouthful. And really, we see that actually in SARA. So although, critics have been pointing out that the 100 ringgit may not be enough, but what I see SARA as is that it's a potential game changer, because in Malaysia and actually in the social policy world, a lot of focus is on poverty targeting. Let's look at the B40. But the reality here is that in Malaysia, the vulnerability of many working individuals in Malaysia is such that they are just one sudden financial shock or emergency away. So instead of the B40, we're looking at data that perhaps shows us that it's not B40, but B80, simply by how vulnerable large segments of the population is, which tells us that a large segment of the population require aid and help from the government. So how do we move forward, right? And I mentioned SARA because it is the first time that something has been given universally without looking at income. And that is a potential window for us to basically normalize and sensitize the idea of more universal welfare programs. Of course, that requires costs, that requires money, a lot of resources. But how do we do it? We need to move towards income or poverty targeting, towards a life cycle approach, which looks at specific vulnerabilities at each life cycle of a person. And some of the specific vulnerabilities are, for instance, at childhood. One of my policy recommendations for many years now has been to push for a universal child grant, because that is an incredibly sensitive period, but also it is actually the lowest and cheapest investment with the highest ROI.
Exactly, because that's where you actually are able to intervene on a national policy level if you want to be able to address childhood stunting, malnutrition, and the entire dimension of adulthood issues that comes along with. It's also very interesting to note that of our e-invoicing rollout will be able to reflect real-time income, but cliff edges, once again, they risk hurting families when they move perhaps just even a couple of ringgit amongst income classes. So there's much to be pondered over here, and also the action does need to be taken, perhaps modeling from OECD countries where they actually have a grace period for cutoffs from targeted subsidies, so that there is enough time to actually measure qualitatively and quantitatively whether or not a family ought to be definitively moved into a different income class. Yeah, lots to say over there. But Vaishnavi, going into looking a little broader and casting the net with an eye towards what will be rolling out later this month in September, we've also got the RON 95 targeting due later. And what lessons from SARA's 100 ringgit My Card rollout could be perhaps baked into fuel subsidies before the time actually comes?
Thank you, Tamina. So if you think about it, the SARA rollout is already showing us a lot of valuable lessons. Even though well-intentioned, there's always areas for improvement, right?
Sure.
So the most important is that single-channel systems are quite fragile and they don't necessarily work. So when demand surged on day one for the SARA program, terminals struggled and the trust was affected. So these are exactly the kinds of frustrations we want to move away from at petrol stations when the RON 95 subsidies do come in at the end of the month. So where volumes are going to be far higher, people coming to petrol stations, and also where emotions might run a little bit hotter, right? So some lessons that can be directly applied to the RON 95 rollout from the SARA program is, let me take you in phases. So before the rollout, like the SARA program, one thing that we can gain from that is that we should ensure that MyCard holders can check their, if they are using the MyCard to check for eligibility, we should make sure that people can check their eligibility in advance, like how they did for the SARA program on the MyCard app or another official channel. Another thing is to publish clear eligibility criteria and maybe also a fact sheet well before the launch date. So answering questions like who is eligible, how do these quotas work, what if the pump times out, how do I redeem this? So these kind of questions that people will be asking before the day one, there should be a fact sheet that people can
preempt it in a sense.
So kind of make sure we answer these questions before people even have them. This will show preparedness on the government's end as well, which increases public trust, right? So clear messaging prevents resentment and also confusion. And finally, we could also conduct load tests and simulations for the first day surges, so weaknesses can be addressed ahead of time so that we can identify the gaps and give solutions based on whatever gaps there are. And then let me take you during the rollout. So during the rollout, we can consider a staggered launch, similarly to a thing that we could have done for the SARA program, right? Making sure we staggered the launch in terms of region or even ID number to reduce pressure on the system, like we did see for the SARA program.
It's interesting because if you want to be staggering it according to IC numbers, you could very easily ensure that those who are elderly, for example, would be the ones to be able to get first in line. Right?
Yes, correct. So, and then actually one of the most important thing that I think is important is to train frontline petrol staff, which they could have done for the SARA program, to train cash registers, mighty employees, all these essential workers, so that they know how to respond when people encounter problems. And I think when they see the preparedness that these staff members have, they will naturally have the trust in the government and trust in the system. So the way frontline workers handle these issues can make the difference between public frustration and confidence. And then finally, after the rollout, we can provide clear entitlements at the nozzle. So for example, showing how many liters or how many ringgit is left in your benefits, maybe set in the receipt that you get at the nozzle, or even an SMS that can be sent to
an automated system.
So that kind of shows them how much they have left, and also it encourages transparency and trust and helps people self-manage and self-ration. So the principle is that engineer trust by design. So with strong systems, transparent communication, and also prepared frontline support, Malaysia can avoid the frustration seen during SARA's first days and instead demonstrate competence and care.
Exactly. So there's much to be learnt about it, but at the same time, I think what's really important is having it inbuilt into the system to have offline backup, because potentially speaking, it's going to be a very different scenario unfolding at petrol pumps versus at supermarket or store checkout registers. Derek, let's go deeper from cash to outcomes. Let's say if a rollout such as SARA, either 100 ringgit or otherwise, becomes a quarterly disbursement. So what real difference could it actually make over time, and actually even very quickly in the short term, to child nutrition or stunting rates? Because this is, of course, an issue that you have long worked on.
Yeah, thank you for that, Tamina. I think the value of SARA isn't exactly its function as a welfare aid. Again, RM100 is a small amount, and now it's a one-off. The value is it's an experiment for how we can launch these kind of welfare aid programs in the future. And of course, one of it, like I mentioned, is pushing for a universal child grant, right? It's giving us a lot of valuable lessons in how we can roll out the mechanisms, and especially looking at program delivery and design. And my opinion is that the current system is actually too complicated. You know, if we want to really impact outcomes such as child nutrition, child stunting, of which in Malaysia we have 1 in 5 children under the age 2 who are stunted. A number that is higher than some African countries even, right? We need to move from one-off aid that targets just the poor to something more universal, as I've been mentioning. So to just move to quarterly wouldn't really move the needle. And because, for instance, child stunting happens in the first 1,000 days. That is the most critical, crucial window of a child's life. But instead of making, SARA a quarterly thing, we can actually use SARA's mechanism of universal payments and use it to implement a universal child grant but we need to increase the frequency, right? So what we are doing with SARA isn't actually about the 100 ringgit itself, but it's about mainstreaming the idea that we should give universally. And for me, that can start with giving to children. Give it to children who are 0 to 2 years of age, which is the most sensitive time in a child's period of growth. Give it monthly, give it 100 ringgit, or I would say higher, but otherwise give it monthly without restrictions, and you can give it to mothers, right? And what you can do then is you can really see effects that really impact the growth of a child, but also the productivity of a nation in the future.
Exactly, and it's all about measurable outcomes as well. So perhaps mechanisms that may encourage more consistent universal rollout and allocations for children, Derek. What might you recommend? Perhaps maybe a pilot study that tracks maybe dietary diversity and actually shows us, perhaps month on month and quarter on quarter, how this target group of children are actually faring better.
I think in the ideal, right, systems like that are great, but like I said, they're really complicated, complex, and highly expensive. Instead, I think we need to trust parents to make the right decisions. And data from all over the world where there have been universal child grants show that when given an amount of money, even when there are no conditions attached to it, that you have to spend it a certain way, parents actually spend it on their children. Right? And what we're doing here for a welfare system, like I mentioned, is to meet the people at their place of need. And raising a child has many different pain points. It's not just nutrition, right? Sometimes it's education. Sometimes it's having toys in the house. And there's been studies that looked at how stunting rates will actually improve if there's simply the fact that toys exist in the house. Whereas if you talk to someone else, they may say that you can't use SARA to buy toys because that's not essential.
Very true. It's actually about looking at development as a holistic arc rather than just looking at it, all right, food on the table, but is it just rice, bread, etc.? Very well said indeed. Vaishnavi, let's dig deeper into looking at privacy as well as, of course, dignity of those involved and whose data has been collated. So how do we target help perhaps more precisely without turning low-income Malaysians into data points who are just tracked across agencies? Because, of course, what Derek has just told us about, that would be the ideal big picture to be moving towards. But let's focus on where we're at right now.
I think this is a very crucial question to ask, right, as Malaysia moves towards a more digital safety net. So SARA has shown how targeted support can be delivered at a large scale, but the challenge is balancing precision with, like you said, dignity, privacy, and trust. So the risk is over centralized databases is that people feel reduced to just mere statistics, and we're much more than that. We're human. So a single outdated entry like maybe a car ownership or even an old address, all of this could wrongly disqualify a household, and these are instances we want to move away from. So communities may also feel like they are under a lot of constant surveillance, reinforcing a stigma that that older recipients and rural families may not have the literacy to access or challenge their records if mistakes occur. So instead, what we can think about, we recommend a less intrusive and more practical approach. So we could collect only the minimum necessary data, so like household income band or even household income size, avoiding overreach. A better thing to do is also to use proxy indicators. So like Derek mentioned earlier, using maybe data like electricity usage or even school aid enrollment and health clinic records, using these kind of data to see which which households need this kind of aid without having to cross-check every single data point or across every single ministry. And also empowering community-level validation, right? Talking to village heads, penghulus, resident committees, all of this to confirm eligibility, building transparency, and also shared ownership among government and the public. At the end of the day, I think when you increase public-private partnership and also collaboration, this will only build trust among government and the people, and that is what we want at the end of the day. So also designing systems where eligibility data expires automatically and there is a need to re-verify annually. So this ensures that we reduce the sense of long-term surveillance for people. And at the same time, we should also recognize that cash aid is never really a bad thing. It gives households the flexibility and respects their ability to make choices for themselves and for their families. Because at the end of the day, like Derek mentioned, families know best about their own financial situations and their own bills. So with the budget coming up, right, this is also an opportunity to explore expansion of cash-based assistance, either by increasing the amount or even widening the categories to include other essential items like raw food, vegetables, meats, fruits, to ensure aid remains relevant and responsive. The aim is to be precise and fair while making people feel supported but not surveilled.
Understanding that relative perishability of foods also quite often leads into those being the more nutritious ones on the plate, right?
Yeah.
So moving into closing out the discussion though, Derek, let's look at safeguards before scaling. So let's say before this, a similar system or an improved one is used for fuel or even healthcare subsidies, what basic checks and balances need to already be in place for the policymakers to definitely have in mind?
I think instead of checks and balances, I am all for actually simplifying it.
Simplifying.
So currently we have 14 approved categories, like I said. Abolish them, you know, and let people make the decision as to what they want to purchase. If the government is concerned about temptation goods, cigarettes, alcohol, vape, have one single restricted category, and then that's it.
Simplify it, absolutely.
Simplify it.
And yes, be cognizant that that is an area that you want to ensure does not.
And the other recommendation I would make is that instead of the current credit system, we should actually use actual cash transfers. And of course, that can be leveraged using existing e-wallet platforms or just a simple do it now or using digital bank transfers. Let the cash be given out directly so that, and that also avoids system crashes, because when you have cash, it's up to the individual how they want to spend it, where they want to spend it. And here's the thing about cash, it has a really powerful multiplier effect that could really uplift SMEs, you know, small businesses, not just chain business that are providers that are registered under the SARA program. So I think instead of looking at restricting the program even more, we should actually look at loosening it, because that also avoids a lot of the problems that we've been seeing with SARA. One of the things that people point out is that they don't know what items are included in the 14 categories. They go into the shops, they ask the shopkeeper, and sometimes it even has the My Kasih or SARA logo, but that's not listed in the barcode. In fact, there is an app that exists for you to scan the barcode to see whether that item is included or not. Why all these hurdles, right? Simplify it, make it easy, empower the rakyat to make the decisions that are best for them. And in fact, when you decentralize this decision making, it actually costs less than building this kind of expensive system.
Because centralization clearly has deep fragilities that have already been exposed. So let's widen that net and also the coverage. Vishnavi, stopping out from stopgap to safety net. So if the SARA is to outlive its 100 ringgit headline, what roadmap, in brief, would you propose to make it lasting as a safety net and one which we can build on?
Yeah, so SARA has already shown its potential by expanding beyond a one-off 100 ringgit gesture to target monthly assistance up to 2,100 ringgit annually for poor and hardcore poor households by broadening access to Sabah and Sarawak. So the next step is ensuring that this evolves into a permanent trusted safety net. So in terms of like in immediate terms, in terms of stabilization and restoring trust in the system, we should guarantee that reliability by fixing transaction glitches and preventing these long queues either in petrol fuel pumps or even in grocery stores, ensuring that the ease of accessibility is there, and also publishing real-time dashboards. So like I mentioned, showing uptake, success rates, and also incident resolutions to gain back public trust in the system, and adjusting the benefits to reflect inflation baskets of food and fuel so that the value of the cash aid is not eroded, and providing easy appeal channels for households to update their eligibility or even correct the eligibility if they are not eligible but feel as if they need to. And then in the medium term, broadening and deepening support, we can diversify the benefits into food vouchers, school supply credits, utility rebates, and not just cash. So like what Derek mentioned, instead of putting more restrictions, let's widen it. Let's make it more inclusive to all these other areas where people have a lot more financial needs above just groceries and fuels, because that's not just what we need in our lives, right? Then linking SARA to skills training, micro enterprise support, childcare subsidies, so it becomes a bridge and not just a transfer.
And perhaps even areas for exploring microfinance in the future. Derek, Vishnavi, thank you very much for the very rich discussion. Well, if Malaysia gets this right, we won't just be talking about one-off handouts, but about a permanent digital infrastructure that can potentially deliver fuel, healthcare, even nutrition support, a dignified safety net with precision and trust. The question we leave you with, is SARA the first step in a subsidy revolution, or will it be remembered as a one-hit wonder? That's all we have time for today. See you again next week with more economic analysis and insights. I'm Tamina Cowstry signing off for now. Here's to a productive week ahead. So we're just in the background.
Di dalam setiap berita yang dibawa, konteks amat penting. Kami sentiasa membawa